This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight Mr. Jim Marshall, who for many years represented this district in Congress. Welcome, Jim.
Happy to be here.
Well, tonight we're going to have, I think, a pretty interesting conversation, and that is the collision of two ocean liners, if one can say that. One is healthcare, and the other one is the tort system. And so how those two interact and the impact it has on the country, and just maybe we can get some veritude out of our conversation. Now, you've made comments, and I think correctly so, about the fact that the American healthcare system is so inefficient and soaking up so much of the gross national product that it's really going to undo our whole civilization. So much money goes into it. A comment, and it's so inefficient.
I don't go quite that far, but it's clearly the case that we're about 8 to 9% of our GDP going into healthcare. Doesn't need to be going into healthcare. We'd be just as healthy, just probably happier.
Yes.
Might be healthier.
Yes.
We'd certainly be happier, and those who are in the system would be happier
yes.
if we weren't doing that. And the reason we're sort of paying twice what we should for what we get is because it's a third-party payer system. So you've heard me criticize the new healthcare reform bill. It's going to help millions of people. No question about that. But what it does is it takes third-party payer at 88% and moves it pretty much to 100%. So you have no real market where healthcare is concerned. It's unlike the rest of our economy, all the other professional services that are provided by our economy. It is kind of like going out to dinner and splitting the tab. Only now the entire country is going out to dinner and splitting the tab. And we're just overdoing it. Now, we're not going so far that healthcare, we're getting more healthcare tests, procedures, consults, etc., than we should be. But we're not going past, I think, going past provably bad for us. We just hover underneath that. And it's a disaster for the country's economy. 47 cents of every dollar that goes into healthcare comes from some government taxpayer pocket. If you just look at the federal government alone, it's what, 400 billion to 600 billion every year that we don't need to be spending. It solves our debt problems. This whole argument over the debt ceiling, we wouldn't be having it if we didn't have this poorly structured, awfully structured. It's not poorly structured.
Now, Jim, I'm not without, I hesitate to say this, but in many ways I agree with you on the subject, so I guess I can make myself say that. No, actually,
and Sam, you're not the only doctor. Lots of physicians.
I do agree with you. We need to
get. The question is, how do you move from where we are?
Right, and some of it, I think it's going to be an important part of the national debate, very important, in the healthcare reform package that I guess some people call it Obamacare is on the way. It's coming, and by 2014, it in many ways is going to be here. And it has lots of things that are in it that are going to have this enormous impact on everyone. And one of them is the Medicaid. So the percentage of, I guess, poverty level that's necessary to receive Medicaid now is a fairly low number. It's going up enormously. So many people that now have private insurance are going to wind up receiving, they'll be on Medicaid. All kinds of things are going to happen. And it's fair to say the government is going to be paying for more and more of the nation's health care. And you make the point this is bad because it's going to cost a lot of money. The other issue, I understand the system.
Look, somebody poor truly needs health care. We're wealthy enough we should be able to provide that. Look at the United States, the wealthiest country in the history of the world. It's the structure of the system that's causing us to spend too much money in an attempt to help people. At this point, and if you listen to the debate, it was kind of appalling. Proponents of the reform bill would refer to health care and health insurance as synonymous.
Yes.
They mean the same thing. They just conflate them. And a lot of people think that you got to have health care in order to have health. Oh, now it's to the point where you got to have health insurance in order to have health.
Yes.
And the problem is the third-party pay system means that at the time a critical decision is being made by physician and patient, there are no cost considerations taken into account. You can say, that's great.
Yes.
And certainly I'm in you're my physician,
yes, right.
and I've got a problem.
Yes.
You don't want cost constraints in dealing with my problem,
Yes.
and I certainly don't want cost constraints in dealing with my problem. The problem, though, is when you accumulate that phenomena across 300 million people, it means huge dollars are wasted.
Yes, just so. I mean, but I guess the thought I was going for is several things are happening. Number one is the Medicaid burden that's out there is being placed on the state. So these Medicaid burdens are going to be extraordinary in say, in the state of Georgia. The figure that's been quoted is several $1 billion of additional expenses in 2014. And because of the state constitution, the fact that Georgia doesn't possess a printing press, the fact that these burdensome expenses are going to be distributed, and they're going to have a catastrophic impact on everything. Social services, education, all kinds of things are going to happen. And my comment on this is that rather than doing something in an intelligent fashion to minimize these expenses and make things more efficient, my fear is the feds are going to propagate a series of rules that are not going to be well-founded. It'll be the complexities of the VA and without whatever the benefits the VA offers to these thousands and thousands of people that are going to be in this system.
Do you know how many pages of healthcare regulations we have right now?
Well, let's see, more than this book, a big number, I bet. Is that right?
Well, I wrote a piece that I published in the National Review, and people who want to read it, it's only 2,000 words.
Yes.
If they just go to a search engine, Google something like that, and type Marshall Real Healthcare Reform, it'll pop up. But in it, I mentioned that we have 138,000 pages of federal regulations. Small print, by the way, where healthcare is concerned. You got to ask yourself, what is that about? How in the world did the federal government get to the point where it has cranked out 138,000 pages of regulations where healthcare is concerned? You're right that the trajectory we're on right now is going to cost the state of Georgia and other states a lot more money. The culprit, though, is the structure of the system as much as it is simply the fact that we ought to be taking care of poor folks who truly need care. What we shouldn't be doing is paying twice what we should be paying for the care we all get, and that's what we're doing. If we could capture that 50% too much we're paying, it'd be easier for us to take care of the legitimate needs of folks who can't take care of themselves. But we can't do that. It's because of the third-party payer system.
There's a lot to be said about that. I mean, I'll take. There's a lot of good points you're making there about responsibility for your own destiny, understanding numbers, the patients being informed, saying, "Well, I don't want to spend that much," or "Is another test," or whatever. And there are lots of ups and downs on that. I mean, sometimes patients don't have the cognitive ability to appropriately do that. Lots of issues out there. But I take the point well. But I was in my opening little remarks here, I was giving the analogy of these two ocean liners smashing together. And I will say right away, the healthcare system needs all these attentions, all these things need to be done, and I think it would benefit our society enormously. But on the other side of the fence, what I've rarely heard comments about, or only indirect comments, or is in the tort system that underpins many of the events that are going on here. And I've heard numbers that the actual expense that malpractice adds to to the healthcare system is a pretty small number, because what happens is the people just dissect out the cost of malpractice insurance. It's not such a big number. But at least what I've observed is the secondary cost are the practicing defensive medicine. It's an enormously expensive kind of proposition that's put in place.
I can address that.
Well, all right, then. I'll be more expansive in a little bit, but I'll let you start with that.
Well, you and I have talked about this before,
yes.
Sam. And again, Marshall, Real Healthcare Reform, search engine, you can find it. I talk about it there. I think that along with insurance company and drug company profits, the lament that that the failure to have legitimate tort reform nationwide is imposing all kinds of costs upon us, that argument is one that distracts us from the real problem. It is true that if you did comprehensive nationwide tort reform where medical malpractice is concerned, it would reduce costs. But this is something that's been looked at by the Congressional Budget Office, which is our geeks in Congress, supposedly nonpartisan. When Republicans were in control of Congress, back in 2006, I think it was, CBO, Congressional Budget Office, came out with a report on the cost to the country of defensive practice of medicine. They said it was zero. And then when Democrats were in control, I think this was 2010, CBO came out with a report that said the cost to the country of the defensive practice of medicine, because of the, it's the threat of malpractice litigation hanging over physicians' heads, that it was about 0.5% of healthcare costs, which is a significant number, because that's about $30 or $40 billion a year. The total cost is about 3%, 2.5% for malpractice premiums, those sorts of things. Now, a lot of people would say that there's no business in America, no profession in America that's not subject to the possibility of tort litigation. If you screw up and you hurt somebody, you're negligent, you intentionally do some wrong, that sort of thing. It's just our system. So part of the cost of doing business is to carry insurance that protects you against those kinds of claims. Lawyers, I'm a lawyer, I'm not actively practicing right now, but lawyers have malpractice policies, doctors have malpractice policies, that sort of thing. The question is whether or not physicians are actually practicing, doing more tests, more consults, etc., because of the threat of malpractice exposure. And that's what you mean when you say defensive practice of medicine, and the adding costs to the system as a result of that, right? That's the question.
Well, yes, and I won't. I'll just hit the ball back a little bit. We don't have the methodology of whatever was said. CBO, and just to talk about it, this is would be an extremely. I would question just offhand what their methodology was. Mm-hmm. Because it's a very subjective, the decisions that physicians make mm-hmm. are so subjective, and each physician has their own sense of subjectivity, as do different kinds of parts of the profession. If you're an emergency room doctor, or another, if you're a pediatrician, and you're in a litigious area or not a litigious area, the general customs it's a very subjective thing. So I would be frankly surprised if such a number could be created.
I can tell you what
and just to say about mathematics of this. So the fact that one definite number has been put there would just prima facie make me question the study, because there would be a range. Just having a 0.5% number, there's some kind of range would be what I would expect. So they would say the increase is anywhere from 12 to 2% or whatever, rather than having a definite on the target number, makes me question substantially the methodology involved.
Well, Congress relies on CBO to crank out stuff like this. How did CBO go about doing it in this instance? The Congressional Budget Office has a bunch of geeks in it, PhDs in economics, et cetera. And what they did was review the literature on this very subject, and there are tons of articles and studies and mathematical analyses, et cetera, that have been done on this subject out there. And they came up with this number. And they could have come up with a range. And I think they said that our estimate is, it could be a little bit more, a little bit less. So initially it was 0, and then now why? So why? How could that be? It just doesn't make sense. And I think the answer is this, and it's back to what I've said earlier. The structure of the system that we have right now encourages, over a period of decades, more consults, more tests, more procedures, more drugs, etc. And as more and more physicians do the additional consults, tests, procedures, drugs, etc., that becomes the new standard of care. Professionals generally abide by the standard of care. Whether you are somebody who's nervous about the possibility of liability and a lawsuit brought by a lawyer, or just being second guessed by your colleagues when something goes wrong, or you just want to do right by your patients, there is this standard of care that's out there that seems to have been established, and you sort of abide by that standard of care. That standard of care has evolved in the system that we created starting in World War II, where cost is not even taken into account by physicians and patients at the time that the decisions are being made. So gradually, we've done more and more and more and more and more. We're not healthier for it. In fact, a lot of people who are experts argue we're sicker as a result of this. That's what's driving this, I suspect. And there's no profession or business that is absolutely absolved of the prospect of having some kind of exposure for screwing up and having to pay people. And so what they did was they studied, well, what if you had comprehensive nationwide medical malpractice reform that where awards were capped, like the Georgia changes that were made, something like that. What kind of changes would you expect? And then they looked at all the studies that have been done, and they sort of accumulated all those. Under Republicans, CBO said no cost to defensive practice of medicine. Under the Democrats, they said 5%. It's real money. But I think the explanation is people pay attention. You're a professional. You abide by the standards of care. But what professional is going to step out there and be the first to lead the way toward lesser care?
Now let me just discuss that. So one of the things that's going on here is I think the methodology exercised here was in error. And so you mentioned the idea of standards of care. Now standards of care are fashioned in a complicated fashion. I beat the drum a lot on this. There's absolutely no input into cost when standards of care are put together. Absolutely none. But the people that put these standards of care, they're influenced by whatever would occur in a court of law. That's my opinion, when these standards of care are put there. So there's an indirect impact. And just to talk about that, just to talk about the way the tort system works, if there is a recognized expert that can opine and say, I think you violated the standard of care, you're in error here, then in fact, the standard of care would fall down. So when the people propagate this, they make it the most severe, the most stringent, and often the most unreasonable kind of thing to protect against the way the tort system works. So just to keep bouncing the basketball on the subject, one of the things is that in the courtroom, rather than having a methodology that is a reasonable, rational methodology to get these issues resolved, instead the idea that an expert can be found somewhere, recognized as an expert, and he can give whatever opinion he would like. And so to guard against those assaults, the most rigorous standards of care that are put, I think, are propagated, which often are irrationally expensive. And so what I'm saying is the tort system is having this indirect impact on defensive medicine, and that's where it's occurring. And so the methodology that was employed, where these very small numbers existed, did not consider the way standards of care are propagated. And just to make one other comment here. So just in general, I think this is one of the things that needs to be discussed about our country here, is that's the impact of the tort system on it. It's not just health care. It is everywhere. It's when people walk down the street, when they bump into someone on the sidewalk, the sense of duty has been so pushed that it becomes, dare I eat a peach, a little T.S. Eliot quote there. You might injure some person, you have a duty not to. And that really is restraining American innovation. It's stopping things in many ways. And if we question what's wrong with the country and what's right with the country, I'll concede there are many things in the healthcare system that need reformation. And I mean, we could go into I take your points well, but another thing that needs dramatic attention, and it's not receiving it, is how the legal system is making America a worse place to live. It's making it not as innovative. It's causing substantial economic distress, and we're not having a fulsome discussion about that. What is it? Should when these tort issues are determined, I mean, what's the right venue?
Right,
I'll let you talk.
If I could.
You may.
I have more confidence in physicians than you do, evidently. I think those who, no, I do. I think that those who are trying to figure out what's the right way to go about taking care of a person who is in these kinds of circumstances are sincere. They take into account all the different possible things that you could wind up doing, and then they make a recommendation concerning what they think is the best thing to do. And they don't do that, worried that if they come up with something that's too little, somehow they're going to get sued or questioned because they didn't guard too much against a lawsuit. I think they're sincerely trying to figure out what's the best way to go about taking care of the individual under these circumstances. And I don't think that these standards that have been put together are standards that are driven by the prospect of being sued if you don't abide by the standard. I think the standard evolves because it can evolve because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in where this third-party pay stuff is concerned. And it wouldn't have evolved quite that way if we paid more attention to money and to cost, the overall cost to society associated with individual care in different circumstances. That's one thing. Second thing is this. I don't go through my life making decisions pretty much ever based upon me worrying about I'm going to get sued over this or that. And I'm a lawyer. I'm a law professor. I'm pretty attuned to all these things. I somehow managed to move along in my life and do all kinds of things without worrying about the big bad tort system somehow coming in and sitting on top of me and squashing me. It's true that in different businesses, you carry malpractice, or not necessarily malpractice, but you carry liability insurance against product liability insurance, stuff like that. You don't want to have to do that. You don't want to get sued. You certainly don't want to make a mistake that winds up hurting somebody. But then sometimes that happens. You did make a mistake. And if you made a mistake and put a product out there that wound up hurting people, your malpractice premium hopefully is sufficient to go ahead and pay for the damage that was done. That's okay with me, and I don't think that puts a great burden on the American society. I mean, what you've described about the country going to hell in a handbasket because we've got this system that's almost the envy of the world is ludicrous. One of the reasons why so many developing countries fare poorly is because they don't have the system of rights that we have here in the United States. And it's sort of respect for law and decision made by courts, contract rights, property rights, etc. And without those kinds of things, you can't trust people. You go about your everyday life where commerce is concerned, worried that the other person is somehow going to take your money away from it. And so as a result, people don't do deals. They're constantly worried about being hurt, not being taken care of. The United States has an awful lot of trust in its system. In part, that's provided by courts. Are they perfect? No. Have I voted for a number of reforms? Yes. Are there additional reforms that can be made? No question about it. But to say that the United States has fallen apart because of our court system is laughable. That's not so.
Well, Jim, let's both of us avoid hyperbole, if we can do that. So let's just all right. Now, I think the takeaway message to me is that I totally agree with contract law. I'll pretend to, that's sort of an alien phrase for me, but I'll say contract law is good. I think a lot of the mercantile transactions that we have here are really great, and the law system is great. And if you are in the third world country and you try and do something, any kind of commercial transaction, these things are they don't work. But to say if I could now say, if one could say that the American tort system is the envy of the world, I mean the malpractice system is the envy. I think that's a little extreme, and there are many different ways to do it in a more effective way. And so what concerns me is that the country really, we can say that diminishing the amount of money that goes into the healthcare system would be a great thing. And it would help. We have a tremendous budget crisis. We've got these legacy costs. We've got these debts. We're trying to make the American economic engine a better one. And it's fair enough to say that if you're building, Buick station wagons, I don't think they build those anymore, but if they're making that, your healthcare costs are enormous. You can't compete easily.
By the way, we had a Buick estate wagon.
Did you enjoy it?
Well, we liked the car. It was parked in front of our house. I was the mayor at the time, and somebody tried to steal it. And so we thought, I don't want to really draw attention to so we didn't. So then I guess the same person came back about 2 weeks later and managed to move it all the way to the parking lot right behind your house.
He obviously coveted your Buick station
so
wagon.
then we called the police and we got the car back and whatnot. And eventually, I guess that same person came back and actually managed to steal the car.
Well, there you go. So that's the American ingenuity.
So there are people who really like those Buick.
I see. I've touched a tender memory that on your Buick station.
Can I, if I could?
Just one comment.
Right.
Just one final comment about what I'm talking. Have the healthcare system. This tort system is it has the vagaries of it are out of control, and it's going to be part of the national debate to talk about this.
I suppose we can go back and take a look at the video, and maybe I misspoke, but you characterized what I said about our legal system, I thought, being the envy of the world. You said that I said that our malpractice system, our tort system is the envy of the world. No, it's got lots of things that can be improved where that's concerned. But the general notion is that we're a country that where the average person, it may be a big uphill battle. You might not get the best representation, et cetera. But the average person who's been wronged, whether it's because they had contract rights that were violated or property rights that were violated or somehow they've been physically assaulted or they've been injured or what have you, the average person can get redress in our courts. Lots of improvements need to be made, but there's a lot to be said for a country that gives the average person those kinds of rights.
Just so. I agree with you on that point. I mean, and rights are an important thing. No one wants to restrict rights, and it's an important kind of checks and balances on evil. So I don't diminish the merit of that, and I don't diminish in any way the great good parts of our legal system. But what's happened, it's been so abusive that it's become inefficient, and it's not propagating the average person's life. It's making the average person's life not better but worse. And so the same kind of discussion and debate we're having on the American healthcare system, that discussion needs to go to the tort system as well, and I fear that we're just not having that kind of discussion. I mean, we're not. I mean, for instance, should the number of lawyers, should we have some limitation on those? I mean, are we really getting appropriate societal good out of that? If there's so many lawyers out there, maybe somebody they have to eat. Maybe they're going to be a little too aggressive about how they pursue their trade. I mean, there are lots of issues that I think need to enter public dialogue here, but I will not. I think one of the great things about our country is its legal system. I honestly believe that, and it does great things. It does stupid things. But it's part of our country, and it needs to be cherished.
Well,
and I hope you'll say the same about our healthcare system.
Not the system.
Okay. Oh, not the system.
But the physicians,
yes.
Yes. Oh no, there's no question about that. I think, and I apologize for my earlier hyperbole with regard to things being laughable that you've said. It's because the general assault on the legal system seems to me to be inappropriate, and I apologize for that. You're right. I shouldn't have said that. But I was in the military and in combat, and the people that I admired the most, I was in like real intense combat,
sure.
And I was doing what I wanted to do, and so I'd go out and get in fights all the time because I was given the freedom to do that. But the people that I admired the most were the medics who were out there to help people like me when we got in trouble. They weren't, experiencing the testosterone of combat. They probably were terrified at what was going on, that they had to go take care of somebody like me and others who have been wounded. So, I mean, that's, these medics are docs in my view, and they're doing great things, and I truly appreciate the care that I've gotten from the American medical system. And there are a lot of great people in that system, and they're caught up in a system that's terrible.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thanks for being here, and we'll talk some more. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.